Empress Jathira of the Velconian Empire stood before the observation deck of her flagship, watching the blue-green planet below, with eyes that shifted through the electromagnetic spectrum. She had conquered 47 star systems, commanded fleets that blotted out suns and bent entire civilizations to her will. Yet she found herself drawn to this unremarkable world called Earth, not for its resources or strategic position, but for one of its inhabitants. Dr. Marcus Chen had been brought aboard as a prisoner of war 3 cycles ago, along with hundreds of other humans from the failed defense of Mars. The Velconians had expected the usual: terror, submission, perhaps defiance followed by inevitable surrender. Marcus had done something unexpected. He had asked questions. "Your propulsion system," he had said during his first interrogation, battered and bleeding but with eyes burning with curiosity, "it bends space-time without creating gravitational waves. How?" Jathira had been conducting the interrogation herself, something beneath an empress, but she found human resistance fascinating. She had backhanded him across the face, her strength enough to shatter human bone. He had risen again, blood streaming from his split lip, and repeated the question. Now 3 cycles later, she summoned him to her private chambers. He entered without the chains usually reserved for prisoners, escorted by guards who had learned that restraints were unnecessary. Marcus Chen never tried to escape. He was too busy learning. "You asked to see me, Your Radiance?" His voice carried no mockery despite the honorific. He had learned her language perfectly within weeks, another impossibility that the Velconians struggled to comprehend. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to the cushions across from her throne. When he complied, she continued, "My generals want to execute the remaining human prisoners. They call your species vermin, too stubborn to be useful slaves, too weak to be worthy opponents." Marcus said nothing, simply waited. It was another thing she had come to appreciate about him. He never wasted words on pointless protests. "I told them no," Jathira said, her crest darkening with an emotion her people would call weakness. "I told them humans possess something we Velconians have forgotten. Do you know what that is?" "Hope," Marcus answered immediately. "You've forgotten hope because you've never needed it. Your species evolved as apex predators on a world with no real threats. You grew strong, developed technology, conquered your planet without ever facing extinction. When you reached the stars, you brought that dominance with you." Jathira's 3 hearts pounded in a rhythm her physicians would call alarming. "And humans? We nearly died out a dozen times before we even invented agriculture. Ice ages, supervolcanoes, diseases that killed 90% of our population. We learned that tomorrow isn't guaranteed, that strength alone doesn't ensure survival. We learned to adapt, to hope, to keep fighting even when logic said we'd already lost. Is that why you asked about our propulsion system while bleeding on my floor?" The Empress rose, moving to stand before him. At full height, she towered over his frame by nearly 2 meters. "Because you hope to find a weakness?" Marcus met her gaze without flinching. "No, because I hope to understand something beautiful. Your people have created wonders, Your Radiance. I wanted to know how, even if I'd never lived to share that knowledge." Something fractured in Jathira's carefully maintained control. She reached out with one clawed hand and gently touched his face, tracing the scar her blow had left. "My people call me strong because I can crush steel, because I command fleets, because I have never lost a battle. But I cannot do what you do." "What's that?" "Find beauty in the empire that destroyed your world. Seek knowledge from the hand that struck you. Love the monster that holds you captive." Marcus's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. Before he could respond, alarm shrieked through the ship. Jathira's communicator exploded with urgent reports. A fleet of human vessels had emerged from behind Jupiter's shadow, a desperate last stand by Earth survivors. "They're going to lose," Marcus said quietly, monitoring the tactical display. 300 ships against your armada. It's suicide." "Yes," Jathira agreed, watching her forces move to intercept. "Your admirals know they cannot win." "Why do they fight?" "Because that's what humans do. We've faced ice ages and asteroids and plagues that should have ended us, but we're still here. Not because we're stronger or smarter than the universe that tried to kill us, but because we refuse to accept that our story ends with someone else's victory." The battle lasted 4 hours. The human fleet fought with a ferocity that stunned the Velconian commanders, ramming attacks when weapons failed, manual piloting when computers were destroyed, escape pods being jury-rigged into bombs when nothing else remained. They lost, as mathematics had decreed they must, but they destroyed 47 Velconian warships in the process, more than any opponent had managed in centuries. Jathira watched it all from her observation deck, Marcus standing beside her. When the last human ship disappeared in a cascade of fire, she turned to him and saw tears streaming down his face. Not for the defeat, she realized, but for the magnificence of the attempt. "I am going to do something my people will call weakness," she said, her voice carrying a new certainty. "I am going to withdraw from your system. I am going to return your prisoners. I am going to tell my empire that humanity taught me something we forgot. That true strength isn't measured in the battles you win, but in your refusal to stop fighting for what you believe in, even when winning is impossible." Marcus stared at her, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. "Why?" Jathira took his hand in her massive claws, careful not to harm him. "Because you asked me about our propulsion system while bleeding on my floor. Because you saw beauty in your enemy's achievements. Because you loved me despite everything I've done. If that isn't strength, then I have been strong in all the wrong ways." She released him and turned back to the stars. "Teach me, Marcus Chen. Teach me what it means to hope. Teach me how your fragile species survived when gods would have perished. Teach me how to be strong in the way that actually matters." Marcus stepped forward to stand beside the Empress, both of them looking out at Earth, wounded but unbroken, defeated but defiant, mortal but utterly unwilling to accept mortality as the end of their story. "First lesson," he said softly, "is that strength without compassion is just violence wearing a crown. You've already learned that part. Everything else follows from there." Jathira of the Velconian Empire, conqueror of worlds, began to learn what true strength meant from the species she had tried to destroy, and in doing so, became the first of her kind to understand why humanity would never truly be conquered. No matter how many battles they lost,